Started a series last week looking at the Sermon on the Mount. We saw who Jesus called blessed and how they would be blessed. We saw that by demonstrating these qualities, we could shine our lights before the world to lead them to Jesus. Today we're going to continue to see how we can stand out to the world as Jesus calls us to go above and beyond the letter of the law and follow the spirit of the law. He calls us not just to do the bare minimum to get by, but he calls us to a much higher calling. Let's start out in Matthew 5. Let's look at verses 17 through 20. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus starts this section by affirming that he does not intend to do away with the law or the prophets. Many were afraid that Jesus was going to teach the people that the law and prophets were not important. But Jesus did not do that. He indeed reaffirmed the importance in that he had come to fulfill all that had been spoken of the Messiah in the law and the prophets. Jesus says that one ought not to relax the commandments of God and teach others to do likewise, or they would be in big trouble. The Old Testament still has relevance today as it points towards Jesus and the new covenant that would be established through him. And it contains relevant stories that teach us about God and about following him and the significance of following him, as well as what happens when the people do not follow God. The way we worship has changed as certain shadows have passed away. The feasts and the festivals of the Old Testament period are no longer applicable to us today. The Sabbath is not something that is directly carried over as well today. We had a new day of worship in the first day of the week, and we don't necessarily have that commandment anymore that we must keep that day of rest, even though it's still a good thing to do because God established that day of rest for man. And then also circumcision, another thing that was of the old law that no longer is carried over today as well. There's a bunch of things that are related to Old Testament kind of the way they related to God as far as worship and that covenant with the Old Testament that no longer applies today. But there's a lot that's carried over as well. And so the Old Testament is still relevant today. The God of the Old Testament is the same God that we worship today, and his rules for living have not changed. Jesus did not do away with God's standard of holiness contained in the law and the prophets. Rather, he even in a way added to it. The old law contained very specific commands, and the people thought if they just followed those commands by the letter, they would be fine. People often do not try to go beyond the command to get to the very heart of the commands of God. The commandments have become like a checklist of do's and don'ts, and as long as you followed the letter of the law, you were fine. This led to a rich young ruler who followed all the commandments but was not willing to sell his possessions and give to the poor. It led to Pharisees who were more concerned about apparent work on the Sabbath than a man being in need of healing from his infirmities. It led to Pharisees being more concerned about the outside than the inside. So Jesus said to them, your righteousness needs to surpass the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. They need to be concerned with more than the letter of the law. They need to be concerned also with the spirit of the law. And that applies to us today. We need to be not as concerned about the letter and more concerned about going even beyond the letter to what the spirit of the law actually is. So let's go ahead and take a look at what Jesus has to say about some specifics here, starting in Matthew 5:21 through 26. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you'll never get out until you have paid the last penny. So here he says not just murder is sin, but being angry is sinful as well. The idea was that you could be angry with someone, as much angry as you wanted with someone, as long as you didn't physically harm them or kill them. You could say all kinds of horrible things to them, even. Jesus said, no, this goes against the very spirit of the law. Do not murder. You need to be concerned with your heart. What is your heart saying? What are your heart feeling towards these other people? You're not to have anger in your heart towards someone. So we're to take action against the sinful feelings of the heart. Do not allow hurt feelings or anger to dirty your worship. Go to your brother and forgive him. Seek forgiveness first and then worship. If you have hurt someone, try to make things right before they have a chance to use it against you. Not just to prevent bad things from happening to you, but because it is the right thing to do. Move on into Matthew 5:27 through 30. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. So here you see that adultery is sin, but also lust is sin. The idea was I can think whatever I want about a woman, and that is fine as long as I do not act on those thoughts. But Jesus says if you lust after a woman, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. The heart needs to be changed, not just the outward sin of adultery. David's sins with Bathsheba started with lust. But even if he stopped there, he was still sinning against Uriah by having those impure thoughts about his wife, not to mention disgracing Bathsheba with his thoughts. When you think impure thoughts about a woman or a man, you sin against them. You sin against your spouse if you're married. You sin against their spouse. You sin against the person's parents and against God. And so we need to be careful that we're not having those improper thoughts towards others. We live in a culture that has objectified women with skimpy outfits and using sensuality to sell products, and of course with pornography being as prevalent as it is in our society. And so we need to be careful about the very thoughts that we have, and the solution is to cut off what is causing you to sin. And this works not just with the sin of lust, but it works with any sin that we face. If there's something that is becoming a stumbling block for you, cut that thing out so that you can move on from that and do better. If there's something that is tempting you to waste your time too much, that you're not focusing on things you need to get done, cut that thing off. If there's something that is causing in those impure thoughts, cut that thing out of your life. I had a roommate one time had me take his LAN cable so he couldn't connect to the internet for a while to help him with his impure thoughts there. There's so many different things in our lives that if there's something that's causing you to sin, you can just cut that thing out of your life. Even if it's a person that is causing you to sin, cut that person out of your life if you need to, at least for a time. We need to be careful that we're not allowing things in our lives that are going to lead us into sin. So Jesus talks about if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Whether we're to take that literally or not, the idea, though, is that if there's something in our life that is getting in the way of us having a strong relationship with God, it's better to get rid of that thing out of our life than allow that thing to drag us down into sin. Also, let us help each other out by being modest in what we wear, so that we don't have to be focused on averting our eyes, but that we can look at one another without having that struggle there. Let's go ahead and continue on now into verses 31 through 32. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Divorce is against God's will. God only gives two ways that one is able to get remarried if they get a divorce without it being sin. And that the main way is that your spouse is cheating on you. In that case, the innocent party can divorce and remarry. Jesus said that right there in what we just read, as well as later on. The second one seems to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. If you are married to a non-believer who chooses to divorce you, it seems like because it says you're no longer bound, that there's a potential area there for remarriage. But beyond those two things, if you choose to get a divorce, you're not to remarry. Yeah, I see believers getting divorced and then getting together with new people all the time. people that I thought were committed to each other and following God getting a divorce, and it's not because of sexual immorality. Remarriage is the real sin here. A remarried couple is living in sin because they continue to commit the sin of adultery. And that's Jesus' words, not mine. So, a few warnings for marriage. First of all, choose the right mate. Choose someone who is a believer in Jesus. Choose someone who is committed to the relationship and committed through sickness and in health, through whatever you face together, that they're going to stay with you through thick and thin. And also someone who is tolerable. If you don't expect them to change and become more tolerable over time. If there are things that you realize are going to rub you the wrong way the rest of your life, that you're not going to be able to stay with that person because there's just something about them, then no matter what else is trying to drive you towards marrying that person, maybe you should rethink that and be like, you know what, I'm not going to be able to be with this person for the long term. And make sure that you're with someone that you not only love, but can tolerate all their little idiosyncrasies or whatever that's going on there. That's not going to become a problem over time. It's going to lead you to want to leave them. And then, second, be fully committed yourself. Know that there is no way out if you change your mind and being willing to do whatever it takes to work things out. Once you say, I do, even if there's those things that you realize that, like, that really bothers me, well, you've committed to that person at that point. And so be fully committed through thick and thin, no matter what goes on, that you are going to be committed to that person. Let's go ahead and continue now into verses 33 through 37. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. So do not swear by anything, but be trustworthy. Your life should be such that no one would ever feel the need to ask you to swear on anything. When you say something, people should know it's the truth because you always tell the truth. When you make a promise, people should know that you will carry out that promise if it is at all possible for you to carry it out. As Christians, we need to be fully trustworthy so there will never be a need to swear by God or to swear on the Bible or to swear by our own life or to swear on your mother's grave. We ought to be those that we don't have to swear on anything, because those who know us know that when we say something is the truth and we say we'll do something, we'll do it. Now, is it sinful to swear on anything? That's something that sometimes people bring up, because sometimes they'll have you swear in court on the Bible, or these days just to affirm. But anyway, some people really say, can you swear on something? I'm not sure that's the point really that Jesus is making here. There should be no reason to swear on anything if you are truly living a trustworthy and honest life. And so the point is moot whether it's okay to swear on something or not. We ought to be living such a life that we don't have to swear on something. Just don't need to have to swear on something. Always be able to be taken at your word, and you won't have to. Continue on to verses 38 through 42 now. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. So we have this idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But really, there's God's vengeance, rather than us taking our own vengeance, that is important. There is also judiciary punishment, where people who do wrong are punished by a judge. And that is really what the Old Testament idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is. It was that when being judged by an actual judge, the punishment would be fitting to the crime. It wasn't something that people were meant to take out on their own. We weren't meant to take out our own revenge, but rather it would be God's vengeance and or like a judiciary punishment, not that personal invitation. People had thought that this meant that they could retaliate, but God never meant for this to be a law for an individual to follow. It was just for judges to mete out punishment, and that the punishment should fit the crime. Jesus tells us that we need to show meekness and not retaliate by showing evil for evil, but instead live with the injustices, if that's what it comes down to turn the other cheek, to give to the one who would take from you, to go the extra mile, to give expecting nothing in return, and so on. And that's the way Jesus lived out his life. He went out of his way to help others, and when people did evil towards him, he turned the other cheek. He sought for their forgiveness. He sought for their redemption rather than lashing out against them. He was even silent before those who were crucifying him, and eventually said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." There's a play and movie called Les Miserables. I think the preacher in that near the beginning of that movie shows this very well. In that this guy who had just gotten out of prison comes and stays with him in his house, and in the middle of the night, this guy robs him of his precious silver and takes off, and a police officer catches him and brings him back to the house and asks him about the guy. And instead of turning him in, he actually says, "No, I gave those things to him. And what, you forgot these as well," and gave him more stuff to go. And from that point, that man changed his life around a good bit. Now, the story kind of goes from there. Different stuff happens, but it made a big impact on him that this preacher didn't turn him back in. And of course, made a big impact that he didn't go right back to jail in his life. And so that really shows that idea of going above and beyond. When somebody takes your cloak from you, give them your tunic as well, kind of thing. It's like, wow, could we actually live that out? That's what Jesus calls us to do, to be those who don't retaliate against others, but instead do good even to those who do evil towards us. We should excel in doing good to all people and showing mercy and love to everyone. That brings us right into the next one. Let's read Matthew 5:43 through 48. "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? If you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect." It's easy to love your friends and those who do good to you, but it's hard to love your enemy. Showing love to those who hurt us is probably the hardest thing that Jesus asks us to do. It goes way beyond what any of the people listening that day would have expected him to say. Showing love means doing good to those who do evil towards us, not just turning the other cheek, but actually doing good, actually doing something for them. Showing love means praying for them, not just praying that they get what they deserve, but praying that God will be merciful, praying that they will see the light and that they will be saved, praying that God will be with them and even help them. Jesus prayed for those who crucified him. "Father, forgive them." Stephen prayed for those who stoned him, saying, "Do not hold this sin against them." God even loves his enemies and does good to them, so we should love our enemies and do good to those who are our enemies. Let's go ahead and read Romans 12:14 and then 17 through 21. Romans 12, verse 14 says, "Bless those who persecute you, bless, and do not curse them." And 17 through 21 says, "Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.' To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." We're called to bless those who hurt us. We're called to pray for them and do good to them. It can be easy to repay evil for evil and to be overcome by evil. But we are called to overcome evil with good by feeding them if they need it, by giving them a cool drink on a hot day, by showing them true hospitality. This is not to intensify their punishment one day, but rather that you might win them over. There's a story I've mentioned multiple times to y'all, but I'm going to bring it up again. That's the movie Double Team with Heather and Heidi Burge. In that story, there's this girl who is constantly their enemy, who tries to get them kicked out of school, is constantly trying to turn people against them. And yet one day when she is being bummed out because her dad didn't even show up to pick her up from the airport after one of their tournaments, after he had not been there for any of her games and all the different times, and she is like really sad and bummed out. And Heather and Heidi see this, and instead of just shrugging it off and saying, "Oh, she's been mean to us, let's not do anything about it," they actually go over there and talk to her. And at first she resists it, but then she opens up to them, and then they're able to become friends because instead of being overcome by evil, they overcame evil with good by trying to be there for her despite what she had done towards them. So we're called to be the same way. When the people do evil towards us, let's look for ways to still do good towards them. God calls us to do good to all people, even those who mistreat us. And this is such a high calling. It's a difficult calling as well, but it's also a necessary call to answer. We are to do good to all people, even those who are our enemies, even those who hurt us and persecute us. Jesus calls us to go beyond the letter of the law and follow the spirit of the law. He wants our hearts to change instead of just our outward actions. Instead of just not murdering or not stealing or not committing adultery or not committing false witness, we're called instead to go beyond that, to avoid anger, to avoid coveting in the first place, to avoid lust in the first place, to avoid jealousy, to avoid greed, and so on and so forth. All those things that lead to the outward sins. We are to work on avoiding those as those inward attitudes and thoughts. Our hearts need to be fully committed to doing the right thing and showing love to all people and in all situations, not just checking off a list of outward actions that we should do and shouldn't do. Our righteousness needs to exceed that of the Pharisees, and the only way that is possible is if we embrace a deeper calling than simply following the letter of the law and leaving it at that. We must follow the very spirit of the law of God, which will lead to a much deeper spirituality and love for all of mankind, and much deeper love for God as well. So I want to encourage us to work on the inside attitudes and thoughts, to make those pure and clean, so that our outward actions will flow from that into positive, good actions, showing love to the world around us and doing what is right.